What if I told you I was crazy? What if I told you I had locked all the doors, set this room on fire, and in the next 5 minutes, we're all going to die? I mean, perhaps I'm being a bit dramatic, but this is exactly what the media has taught you about people with mental illness. They say that people with mental illness are erratic, irrational, extremely violent, and in some cases, unintelligent. But you see, on the African continent, mental health does not exist. Mental illness is a white person's disease. If a black person exhibits signs of schizophrenia or psychosis, then we're probably bewitched or inhibited by the ancestors. So yeah, it does not exist here. And perhaps this is why my family missed the signs when I was younger. I was very emotional. I'd be extremely happy one day and then angry and sad the next. But they told me this is who I was. They placed me in this box of highly rational and emotional, and I accepted that. I survived high school that everyone hates, and I got to university, and in the first 6 months I realized something was wrong. I'd call my mom and say, "Mommy, I don't like it here. I don't have friends, I can't cope, I'm passing, yes, but everything else doesn't fit." My mom was like, "You know, black moms, don't worry, everything is fine, you'll make it, first year jitters." And I believed her. For the next 2 years, I went about my ways, believing that that feeling inside me was okay. But then I got to my third year. In my third year, everything changed. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to lectures. The only thing I managed to do was wake up, take a shower, because hygiene is very important, and go back to sleep. But this is how I know miracles exist. Because by some miracle, I got my degree. My mom, sister were really happy. She made it. She's going to be a chartered accountant. But I wasn't. You see, that degree represented loneliness, depression, mania. That degree was everything I didn't want to be. So I was like, okay, let me go to another university. Things will change, environments, Went to another university. This time I managed to make friends. And I went about my year. Things looked good. But then it happened again. Except this time, I couldn't sleep. I would say good night to my friends, but I knew that I'd spend my night walking around campus, envying those that could sleep, and going to lectures extremely tired. So I was like, okay, maybe I need help. I went to a psychologist because, and what happens with psychologists is that they make you take this test, right? And I passed. Or perhaps I failed, depending on society standards. See, based on the test, I had severe depression. The psychologist scribbled something down on a piece of paper, and they were like, take this down to the doctor, and they'll know what to do. I went to the doctor scribbled something more, gave me a prescription and said, these are antidepressants, you'll be fine. And I believed them. I mean, they are doctors. I took the antidepressants, and things did change, except this time, my mind was in a fog. I couldn't think. I didn't know what was the difference between reality and my own hallucinations. And then I decided, I'm not going to do this to myself. I got off the medication, ditched my studies, and came back home and started working. Everything was great. I mean, I'd go out, yes, I'd drink tea, but I had an amazing time. People even said I was probably lit. But then, one day, I came home from a client, and that day, I decided that I was going to die. I took a bunch of sleeping pills and lay in my bed, and then there was this gap filled with darkness. And in that space of darkness, you don't feel anything. There's no sadness, there's no fear, there's no anger. That sadness is death, and it's beautiful in that moment. The next thing I know, my mom was shaking me and she was like, "What are you doing?" Days had passed, and I'd failed again. I was alive. But then that incident taught me and my family two things. It taught us that, one, mental illness is not a white person's disease. And two, it was all in my head. So this time I went back, took another test, and got two people, a psychologist and a psychiatrist. See, leveling up. And they were like, okay, you don't have depression, but you have bipolar. What bipolar is that you have periods of mania and then periods of severe depression. Well, what people call moody, but like times 100. And then I was like, okay, I can deal with this. Gave me more medication. And they told me I need to tell my employer. Seeing who I worked for, I really thought my employer would understand. I went to my HR manager and I was like, okay, so I have this thing called bipolar, and on some days I'll be really angry. On some days I'll be extremely happy. On some days I probably won't even come to work. So please try and understand. My HR manager was like, okay, let me quickly talk to your psychiatrist and I'll get back to you. Talked to my psychiatrist. She came back and she was like, Ros, we don't believe this bipolar thing. We don't think it's real, so you need to come to work every day. And I'd just like to pause here. Imagine if I told you I had cancer at the beginning of this speech. You'd be filled with empathy. Imagine if I told you I was undergoing chemotherapy at this moment. You'd probably be like, you know what? Rest. You don't have to come to work. It's okay. What people do not understand is that mental illness is the cancer of the mind, and we have to undergo chemotherapy every single day. But then people come up to us and like, you know what, it's all in your head, happy thoughts, and you'll be fine. No. But my personal favorite is, don't take your medication, you might get addicted. Imagine telling someone with diabetes that, don't take your insulin, you might get addicted. But I don't blame my employer. You see, Namibia's only mental health act was enacted before the country of Namibia even existed. It was enacted in 1973. And since 1973, Namibians have failed to do anything to tackle mental illness. Right now, Namibia only has 2 mental health facilities, or state facilities. One is in Oshakati, and one is in Windhoek, 700 kilometers apart. 2 facilities for over 2.5 million people. Between these facilities, there's only 5 psychiatrists, less than 40 psychologists for 2.5 million people. I am lucky and I'm privileged that I can afford medical care, private medical care. Medication is extremely expensive. Going to a private facility means you have to pay 2,000 Namibian dollars, less than around about 170 US dollars per day. And they tell you have to stay there for 2 weeks minimum. So is it fair to tell a Namibian that probably lives below the poverty line that you either have to choose between your sanity or feeding your family? I don't think that's a choice anyone has to make. I don't think that the Namibian government has to force its people to let go of their mental health to feed families. But Namibia is not the only country. The WHO says even first world countries are failing. 50% of people in first world countries do not receive the care they need. This number increases to 75% in third world countries. Taking into account that 300 million people live with depression, 60 million people live with bipolar. So I want you to look to your left and to your right, behind you or in front of you, depending on where you're sitting. 1 in the 4 of you have a mental illness. And everybody's probably pointing at me like, no, it's not me. And I know when I'm standing here, people are like, no, she doesn't have bipolar. She's lying. She wants a TED talk. Yeah. But I do. And I got to this point because, firstly, I have friends and family that have supported me, that have tried to understand what bipolar is, that have read up to see that when I'm having a manic episode, I can't spend my entire salary on food because I love to eat. And when I'm in a depressive mode, they need to make sure that I do not do anything to myself. Secondly, I have to eat very well. I don't have a choice. I have to ensure that my body is strong enough to carry me when my mind isn't. Thirdly, I had to exercise. See, I had 3 choices. 1, I could run, but I don't sweat, so no. 2, I could swim. I'm a black woman. We don't get our hair wet. No. And 3, I could do yoga. And I was like, okay, it looks easy enough. Let me do it. It was hard. But this is exactly why I'm standing barefoot here. You see, on the yoga mat, I'm safe. On the yoga mat, I am myself. On the yoga mat, I can release the emotions that society says are taboo. So standing barefoot here, I can be honest. I can be open. I can be myself. And the last thing is, well, not the last thing, the second last thing is I take medication. I told you I'm on antidepressants and mood stabilizers because, yeah. And other people are lucky enough to not have to take medication. Other people can eat well, exercise, and they won't have any episodes. But I'm not one of those people. Currently, I'm on my 7th combination of medication. They say I have a resistant type of bipolar that doesn't really like to respond to medication. But I'm here. And the last thing is going to therapy. People don't like talking to strangers, but it's really important sometimes. I have a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, all these things are important to get you to a space that is safe enough to function. But people are looking at me and saying, okay, so what can we do, you know? What can we do to change the world? But we have to do this. We have to talk. We have to have open and honest discourse. We have to show the world what mental illness looks like, how to care for those with mental illness, how to care for those that care for those with mental illness. My name is Ros Limbo. I'm a black woman living on the African continent with a white person's disease.